Please let me apologize for this scarry face. I don't have shingles. I don't have Carpes sarcoma. You haven't caused me to break out in hives. I had these little nubby things, and my doctor wanted to freeze them off. So he did. And then now I look at myself in the mirror and I'm horrified. So bear with me. Thank you. My sermon this morning, The Growing Light. My intention, to consider a common denominator running through all of the December holidays, returning light. The concept of light, growing, increasing light, can be approached in many ways. This morning we have already done so through our observation of the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is just one of the many Northern Hemisphere celebrations that celebrate returning light in the midst of winter darkness. Northern countries everywhere incorporate light into their December holidays. Christmas lights, Kwanzaa lights, and so on. There are two aspects to light, and I want to focus on both. The outer light, that is the light out there, observable in the candles, in the sun, and the inner light, the indwelling spark of hope, spirit, and imagination, of which we sang about just this little light of ours. Now, these two lights are intimately connected. By and large, Hanukkah celebrates the outer light, not exclusively, but that's what the celebration tends to focus on. In America, Hanukkah is customarily celebrated as a festival of religious freedom, and the first hymn kind of focused on that. Now, the story behind the holiday is as follows. 3,500 years ago, the Hebrew tribes invaded Canaan. Meanwhile, barbarians, Hellenes, were pouring out of Central Europe and doing some invading of their own into the rocky Aegean lands we now call Greece. The emerging principalities evolved into centers of grace and sophistication. Their people became traders and adventurers. Over the course of the next 1,500 years, of all the people the Jews came in contact with, the Hellenes, or Greeks, were the most formidable. Though their armies were strong enough, their real power lay in their culture. The freedom, wealth, and beauty of the Greek urban style were compelling alternatives to the dull, repetitive routines of Semitic theocracy. In 325, one of their leaders, Alexander the Great, conquered the known world, which led to the gradual Hellenization of Judea and the growth of a middle class there. In Jerusalem, a schism emerged between those loyal to the Hebraic law and those supporting Greek ideas. Under the leadership of one Antiochus, those following Greek ideas sacked the temple and ordered heathen altars set up across the land. Soon, a civil war erupted. In the midst of growing mayhem, a man named Mattathias and his 5 sons, the Maccabees, aided by courage, good luck, and chutzpah, managed to expel the Greek regents and reestablish the Orthodox faith of their ancestors for a time. As I mentioned moments ago, it is common in this day and age for Jewish leaders, especially American Jewish leaders, to present the Hanukkah story as a struggle for religious freedom. The Greeks sought to deny religious liberty. The Jews fought back and regained their freedom. The story sounds good, but in fact, the claim for religious freedom is hard to sustain. The Maccabees were devout authoritarians and theocrats. The Hellenists fared no better under the Maccabees than the Maccabees had under Antiochus. In fact, it all became a lot worse, leading over the course of the following 7 years to over 50,000 deaths and decades of reprisal. Interestingly, the Greek period before Antiochus was a far more liberal time than the era of Maccabean rule. The Pharisees, in the earlier period under Antiochus, the Pharisees, Hellenists, and Hasidism all lived together in plenty of mutual hostility, but without the means to destroy one another. The Hanukkah story, then, realistically speaks not to the ethical message of religious toleration and freedom. At best, it yields the moral value of national liberation. That is, freedom for the Jews to enjoy home rule. But home rule is hardly religious freedom as we know it. Why? Because there were no minority rights. Movements of national liberation are familiar events in human history. They are much older than liberal minority rights conferring democracy, and they strike more powerful emotional chords. In modern times, they frequently use the propaganda of freedom to camouflage dictatorship. Until a month ago, Robert Mugabe was the increasingly repressive, ruthless, homophobic ruler of Zimbabwe since 1980. I remember listening, I was living in the Berkeley Marina in a very funky houseboat in 1980, and I remember listening to the morning news on KPFA and crying the day the white minority government there fell, ushering Mugabe into power. But it turned out that the revolution he led was more about national liberation and personal enrichment than freedom. True freedom involves and ensures minority rights as well as individual rights, individual human rights, and the opportunity for self-expression. Living free involves personal security from terror and the personal freedom to grow, to worship, to love, and to be creative and create things. Until and unless the outer social and political environment is so ordered as to foster genuine self-expression, one's inner light will not shine. It won't be able to shine. This is because, from a religious point of view, the outer light and the inner light are reflections of each other, and they go hand in hand. An enlightened social order fosters the encouragement of inner development, self-expression, and hope within people's hearts and imaginations, and vice versa. That is, self-motivated, creative, self-expressive people are more likely to do the hard work necessary to maintain and strengthen an enlightened social order. Though less automatic, it is still possible for people to have inner light, to cultivate their inner light, their inner strength and wisdom, when the outer light is, in fact, dim. Indeed, it is in just such conditions that some people become truly great, often by just deciding to be creative despite all that would prevent them from doing so. We are never victims, but co-creators of our fates, sometimes in very trying situations and circumstances. Many who have gone on to notable achievements say afterwards that the deciding moment for them was when they made the decision to act as though they could see growing light, even though it was, in fact, still dark. And conversely, we all know people who continually point to unenlightened social conditions as the reason for their failures and as an excuse preventing them from working to make things and their own lives better. One can make the argument that the kind of balance I'm talking about between enlightened people and an enlightened social order requires more than just political rights. That any truly free society needs, as President Franklin Roosevelt proposed in 1944, an economic bill of rights, too. This has been the overarching concern of nearly all the delegates from second and third world countries attending recent World Parliament of Religion conferences. And they've been every 3 or 4 years now, since 1999, in various countries of the world. And this, I say, the second and third world delegates to these conferences keep talking about the need for an economic bill of rights, which I need not add is in nearly 180-degree contrast to the tax bill currently being debated in our Congress. The freedom to be whole people, religiously whole, requires an element of economic as well as political freedom. Any social order which these little lights of ours inside, everyone's is gonna shine, any social order ensuring that will also have to ensure its citizens' freedom from want. Now, I've mentioned a few times now in the last 3 or 4 months this idea of one's inner light. What really do I mean? Generally, I think of inner light as a metaphor referring to one's spark of authentic individuality. But there's more. It's more than only or just a metaphor. Consider the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson in his essay, The Oversoul. From within or from behind, a light shines through us upon things and makes us aware that we are nothing, but the light is all. Metaphor, or more than that, there seems to be a connection between this inner light and the so-called outer light. I once read an Isaac Bashevis Singer story about 2 teenagers who escaped from the Nazis. In a Polish ghetto, before breaking out, the 2 youths risked capture and death by defying the law and bravely lighting the candles of a homemade menorah. The outer light suddenly ignites their hope, the inner light. Many months later, after they've bravely escaped Poland and found their way through many harrowing adventures all the way to Palestine, the 2 look back on that simple menorah lighting as the event that inspired their bravery. Perhaps some of you have had occasions in your own lives where some outer manifestation of light brought renewal to your hearts and spirits. I certainly have. As interim senior minister at the San Francisco Unitarian Universalist Church in 2011-13, I met with serious resistance from among the entrenched and intrigue-prone staff. In the midst of it, I anguished a lot and went through a period of serious introspection. To help me remain connected to inner well springs, I often sat in my garden in the evening. I strung up some lights and, like the Hebrews of old, arranged some candles on my outdoor table. Aids to meditation, in a way, to calm me and buoy my spirits through a lonely and trying time. Out of one's meditative center can come not only peace of mind and peace of heart, but inspiration. An article I read during that time in the Smithsonian Magazine suggests that being mesmerized by firelight may have sparked the evolution of the human brain, helping endow us with capacities such as long-term memory and problem solving. So there's a connection that we feel from time to time quite profoundly between the light of the world out there and the inner light of hope, resourcefulness, and creativity. The scientific study of light, known as optics, confirms that despite our penchant to think of light as coming from out there and shining across our inner tabula rasas, it doesn't, in fact, work that way at all. Light is more properly understood as a relationship between the eye and the environment, more or less as Emerson described. Whether from within or from behind, a light shines through us upon things. If this is so, and I fully believe that it is, the trick must be to somehow open ourselves, our hearts, our souls, in such a way so as to enable this light to shine through us unobstructed, to become vessels or vehicles for it. In this endeavor, nothing, it seems to me, is more helpful than intentional communities like UUCIL living up to, truly practicing its covenant. Places where we can be encouraged and confirmed in the importance and value of this effort to grow in receptivity to light, where we can support one another, where we can inform our children about the sacredness of the inner-outer light and our reception of it, and of our efforts to build a social and political order that makes its reception recognized and understood as a cultural value, one we need to make available to everyone. All other activities of the church, it seems to me, are secondary. Church life must focus on recognizing and giving expression to our growing individual and collective rights. This is our beacon of light that we celebrate each Sunday when we light the chalice, and it's the everlasting light of love and truth. Let the December holidays then be for us here at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Livermore a celebration of our freedom to be creative, giving, and open, and our freedom to establish and support this free church where each of us can be ourselves, confirming and affirming our deepest, most generous and hopeful beliefs and understandings, such that for each of us and through each of us and between us and those in our midst whom we love, a spirit of hope and creativity will shine, revealing the renewal of nature, of ourselves, and of our world, revitalized as ever by growing light. Blessed be. Shalom. Namaste.